Whether it's the North or South, Korea is well known for its unbelievable lifestyles. But the nth room caught my attention in the worst way. The nth room was this infamous chat room on the dark web. It consisted of many different chat rooms, but the whole entire shebang was known as the nth room. The nth room is where women of all ages, old, middle-aged, 20s, young, small children, were all extorted, tortured, essayed, even trafficked for the amusement of over 200,000 paying anonymous members. To even become a member of these chat rooms, you would have to submit proof of you abusing or extorting a woman or a small girl in your family or anyone close to you. You would have to submit just disgustingness. Somewhere in the years of 2018 and 2019, a group of perverted criminal minds would come together and start this havoc on the popular app known as Telegram. It would initially start with the user known as God, whose real name is Moon Hyung Wook. God would start what we know today as the nth rooms. Some of these rooms would be called the female child room, slave room, and anybody who knows about the nth rooms, the infamous doctor's room. The nth rooms consisted of multiple rooms, just under different names, but the same sinister, evil content. Actually, the more wicked the room, the higher people would pay. And of course, some would submit small payments, $25, $50, $100. But there were high-paying users, paying anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. And I'm pretty sure you guessed it, the nth rooms were consisted of about 99.9% males, if not completely 100% males. They would blackmail young girls out of very, very private and personal information and use this information to get them to do whatever they wanted. This would usually start with blackmailing the young girls out of very explicit photos and video of them. Not just girls, but just small children even. These men would pay top dollar to watch these girls be humiliated and tortured. They would have them lick the urine off of public toilet seats. They would have them carve the word slave into their bodies. They would even have some of them insert live insects into their private parts. As we know, though, average citizens do not have money like that to just blow to watch things like this. To expend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to have girls do this kind of things, you would have to be, like we know some of them were celebrity figures in Korea. They were doctors, they were lawyers, they were public figures. They're celebrities that were in this. But unfortunately, a lot of them would get away with this, and they're still walking free today. A lot of the creators were arrested and put into prison, but the viewers, the ones who paid for these despicable crimes, are still walking amongst us.
With pornography and sexual imagery as easy to access as typing in the search bar, one would assume that there would be no need for sexual violence or intrusion. In fact, just as many argue that prostitutes offer a buffer from sexual violence for regular women, many proponents of pornography argue the same. It's an outlet for sexual desire, they argue. It will lower the likelihood of rape and assault. This is a lie. It's a fantasy to justify the child of Omelas. If those women suffer, then the other ones will not. If you look the other way, then you will be safe. The violation is the point. As Linda West writes in Female Purity is Bullshit, the sexualization of women is only appealing if it's non-consensual. Otherwise, it's sluttiness. After all, why would men engage in voyeurism? Why would there be an epidemic of deepfakes and non-consensual pornography? The idea of porn and prostitution offering an outlet for dangerous male sexual appetites is a lie. The argument that pornography serves a buffer which allows for the safe consumption of dangerous kinks, or worse, that kinks are not dangerous at all, has been tied to both the feminist movement and the gay rights movement under a guise of acceptance and tolerance. The underlying thought process is that since homosexuality is a fetish or kink and is gaining acceptance, so too should any other sexual predilection. This is ultimately supported by the queer identity, which has been redefined by many to include anything not hetero and straight, but still holds its original association of weird and odd. It's from this redefinition and the desire to stand out that many heterosexual people have found ways to dissect their behaviors and desires into neat new categories with their own little labels. Alongside this has been a concerted effort to rebrand sexual positivity to mean sexual permissiveness, wherein no one is allowed to critique anything because being mean is worse than doing harm.
A very common response that I get in my criticisms of kink is that women enjoy it too, and that is an undeniable fact. But when discussing this, you have to take into consideration, why is it that women enjoy this? Women are disproportionately more submissive in BDSM relationships than men are, which makes you wonder why that is. As humans, we are products of our environment, and the things that we like and the way that we view ourselves, the way we view other people, the way we view relationship dynamics is going to be shaped by what our society tells us it should be. In a world where women are objectified, raped, sexually exploited, and abused from birth, it is only natural that we are going to adapt to learn to enjoy those things as a coping mechanism. As women, we objectify ourselves, and there have been many studies proven to back this up. It's also the only logical conclusion in a generation where we are being raised on porn, and little girls are watching porn, seeing women being treated as objects, seeing women being beaten, violated, exploited, and they're internalizing that this is what sex is, that this is what sex should be. It's only natural that they are going to develop a narrative of sex that relies on violence, and them being the targets of that violence. This all begs the question of, is it really healthy for women to be just recreating this violence that we've been taught to enjoy from birth by reenacting those dynamics in sex and telling men that it's normal to get off on our pain? I am of the opinion that the most healthy and the most reasonable way to go about this would be to unlearn these ideas of sex that we have and to realize that they're not actually normal. It has been an ongoing narrative for decades upon decades, centuries even, that women have an internal desire to be raped and to be exploited, that it's something that we secretly desire, that it's something that we want pain, that we want suffering, that we want men to do this to us. When I talk about kink, the way that it's hurt me, the way that it's hurt other women, the way that it's traumatized us, and men respond with, but you guys like it. It's the same thing, over and over and over again. No critical analysis of it. And as soon as somebody does critically analyze it, they're kink shaming.
On top of this, feminists who oppose pornography or rampant sexualization are often accused of sexualizing women themselves, as if the act of recognition is the same thing as perpetuating it. Others choose to present all criticism as pearl-clutching prudity, thus delegating critics as being perverts or prudes, rather than accurately pointing out the nature of the porn industry and its effects on consumers. Porn is bad. Full stop. Even studies conducted before pornography was widespread found this to be the case. With over 30 years of studies to fall back on, it's become evident that pornography usage leads to escalating behavior, as continual use of pornography leads to desensitization. Just as regular drug use requires more and more to feel the same high, porn must be varied and more extreme to elicit the same response as it did when you initially started using it. As noted in a meta-analysis conducted in 2010, it was found that there was an overall significant positive association between pornography use and attitudes supporting violence against women in non-experimental studies. In addition, such attitudes were found to correlate significantly higher with the use of sexually violent pornography than with the use of nonviolent pornography, although the latter relationship was also found to be significant. In simpler terms, using pornography, particularly violent pornography, is associated with supporting violence towards women. High pornography use is also accepted with greater acceptance of rape myths and a lack of desire to marry or have female children. It's important to note that given that viewing child pornography increases the likelihood of an individual offending by normalizing or legitimizing the sexual interest in minors, as well as that pornography can eventually cease to satisfy the user, the same can be said of other fetishes or turn-ons that are harmful.
I'ma go buy me a gun, and I'ma come back here and set this motherfucker off.
If you thought that video was bad, let's have a look at the comment section. Trigger warning because this is extremely violent and shocking. Not mine feeling me up while I'm crying over my dead dad. Mine trying to initiate the same act I just told him was done to me as a child, and him not understanding what he did wrong. I don't believe he didn't understand. My ex did this while I was crying in bed sick. He really went through with it too. I was so young and naive. My ex coerced me into it 3 days after my C-section. I really didn't want to. I was extremely scared. He promised to be gentle, and I cried the entire time. My ex did this all the time, and I was afraid to cry around them because of it. My boyfriend says my crying turns him on. I wish many people weren't as distracted. I think it's time for people to realize just how common this crying and struggle kink is towards women. It's not just common, it's also socially accepted and marketed. Just think about how the pornographic industry has sexualized female pain. And even before the industry, what do you think torture methods for women have always looked like? Many men get turned on by witnessing women going through high levels of stress. How else would you be able to maintain an erection while sleeping with someone who had a C-section 3 days ago and is crying her eyes out? I like to call this next level sadism. What we're talking about is not a momentary kink that you can walk in and walk out of. It's a whole lifestyle. Think with me for a second. Please stay with me here, don't be distracted. Knowing how common it is to enjoy seeing women in pain and inflicting pain onto women, does this not explain other things to you? Does it not explain to you why 80 to 90% of rape victims are female? And don't come for me for the 1998 date. This study was done again in Europe in 2015, and the results were pretty much the same. Does what we've been talking about also not explain to you why 99.3% of women in the UK reported having been subjected to at least one act of sexual violence since birth? I also hope it makes you understand why it's 1 in 9 little girls under the age of 18 compared to 1 in 53 little boys. That thinking can also be internalized in us. Sometimes you have to fight yourself first. I don't like to kink shame, but fantasizing about being raped is not normal.
Watching porn is not harmless. It normalizes and escalates harmful sexual behavior, and given that much of porn centers around harming women, Dworkin's quote, "Porn is the instruction, rape is the practice," continues to be truthful. As was found in Crossman's 1995 study, the more frequently men used pornography and the more violent the pornography they used, the more likely they were to be involved in various types of coercive sex, including physical coercion. In addition, the results indicate that males who use pornography and experience more pressure from their fears are disproportionately involved in sexual aggression and date rape. The point is that women do not consent, do not enjoy it, are hurt, and have no power. Porn is made by men who recognize these truths, and they openly admit it. Pornographer Brandon Iron, explaining why men like to ejaculate onto women's faces, says, "It's like a dog marking its territory. You know, why do dogs pee on fire hydrants and trees? I don't know. It's just like a man will leave his mark on a woman. You see something beautiful, you've got to let them know you were there." Paul Heskey of Multimedia Pictures, as quoted by Robert Jensen in Getting Off, reports, "Essentially, it comes from every man who's unhappily married, and he looks at his wife who just nagged at him about this or that or whatnot, and he says, 'I'd like to fuck you in the ass.' He's angry at her, right? And he can't. So he would rather watch some girl taking it up the ass and fantasize at that point he's doing whatever girl happened to be mean to him that particular day. And that is the attraction. Because when people watch anal, nobody wants to watch a girl enjoying anal." Ex-porn actor and Free Speech Coalition board member Bill Marigold, quoted by Stoller and Levine, noted, "I'd like to really show what I believe the men want to see. Violence against women. I firmly believe that we serve a purpose by showing that. The most violent we can get is the cum shot in the face. Men get off behind that, because they get even with the women they can't have. We try to inundate the world with orgasms in the face." It is from this mindset that we see cases like that of Gisèle Pélicot.
Gisèle Pélicot married a man named Dominique Pélicot, and together they had 3 kids, then 7 grandchildren. They lived in a province in southeastern France. In 2020, local French police invited Gisèle to speak to them after her husband of 50 years was arrested for filming up women's skirts in their local town. While in this interview, investigators presented her with an image of herself, unconscious in her bedroom. This image was just the beginning. There were dozens of videos involving dozens and dozens of men found on Dominique's computer under a file named Abuse. If you've heard about it, you'll know how confronting some of the details are. The trial started last week, and Gisèle has waived her right to anonymity. On the stand, she gave evidence for 90 minutes, explaining how she thought she had Alzheimer's after years of memory lapses and unexplained health problems. Dominique has admitted to the charges against him. If this were a simpler story, we would dismiss him as a monster, a psychopath. But what makes this crime more sinister is the willingness of these seemingly ordinary men, a polite neighbour, a local counsellor, a nurse, a former police officer, a firefighter, to perpetrate a violent crime when invited to do so. So far, 14 of the defendants have confessed, and not one of these men, even those who walked away and did not perpetrate abuse, made a phone call to police.
Whose husband had invited over 72 strangers to rape her while she was drugged and asleep. The result of the long-time abuse was detrimental to her body and health, but also to her mental state, as her behavior had led loved ones to fear she was suffering from dementia. Although suggested that the trial remain closed, she has bravely decided to make it public, to ensure that the man who raped her received the brunt of the shame and negative attention, especially given how rarely sexual offenses are seriously prosecuted. The regressive attitudes towards rape held by the men involved are obvious, as a majority of the defendants are contesting the accusation of rape. Some have claimed they believed the husband's consent for sexual intercourse was sufficient. Others said they were tricked by Dominique to believe his wife was consenting. This is an obvious lie, as they had to follow certain rules. They could not talk loudly, had to remove their clothes in the kitchen, and could not wear perfume or smell of tobacco, which are obviously in place to prevent Gisèle from waking up. Many of those who participated in her rape read through an online chat room that has since been taken down. None of the men involved received consent from Gisèle herself, showing how quickly fantasy can become reality. As noted in a report by Vox, the identities of these defendants haven't been revealed, although authorities note that they range from the ages of 26 to 74, that many have partners, and that they come from a wide spectrum of backgrounds, including firefighters, journalists, and soldiers. Dominique Pélicot has admitted the abuse and also told a psychologist that he did it because Gisèle had rejected swinging or sleeping with other people outside their marriage. 3 men were invited but chose not to report this to police. Many of the men involved were in her community. This case is especially frustrating, as it illustrates the role pornography plays in the normalization of sexual violence and fetishes, as well as how violation is being centered in packaged male sexuality. And yet, the left continues to defend porn, while the right blames the women trapped in the industry, and all the while, watch it themselves. Meanwhile, any woman opposed to pornography is considered odd and extreme, as can be seen in the work of feminists from before the rise of the internet. When Andrea Dworkin was asked, "Can you explain why you are so opposed to pornography?" she responded, "I find it strange that it requires an explanation. The men have made quite an industry of pictures, moving and still, that depict the torture of women. I am a woman. I don't like to see the virtual worship of sadism against women because I am a woman and it's me. It has happened to me. It's going to happen to me. I have to fight an industry that encourages men to act out their aggression on women, their fantasies, as those aspirations are so euphemistically named. And I hate it that everywhere I turn, people seem to accept without question this false notion of freedom. Freedom to do what to whom? Freedom to torture me? That's not freedom for me. I hate the romanticization of brutality towards women wherever I find it, not just in pornography, but in artsy movies, in artsy books, by sexologists and philosophers. It doesn't matter where it is. I simply refuse to pretend that it doesn't have anything to do with me, and that leads to a terrible recognition. If pornography is part of male freedom, then that freedom is not reconcilable with my freedom. If his freedom is to torture, then in those terms, my freedom must be to be tortured. That's insane.
Some updates on the Gisèle Pélicot case. There haven't been too many, that's why I haven't done a video from my last one, but there are a couple updates that I can share. So in my last update, I said that the monster in question and the perpetrator of the awful organisation that was set up to abuse Gisèle had to be excused from court because he had fallen ill. The next day, he was also excused from court because he was still ill. But the purpose of the second day where he was excused was that the court was going to look at one of the other abusers that was basically Dominique's apprentice, and he was teaching this other man to drug his wife and basically do the same thing to his wife that he was doing to his own wife. It is my understanding that Dominique did also abuse this man's wife when he was teaching him the ways. Like, I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's just what I've heard on the grapevine. Now, as we know, Dominique's lawyer, who is a woman, by the way, I know, crazy, has told the judge that Dominique pleads guilty on all counts. And on top of that, that every person that also came to abuse his wife was also fully guilty and knew exactly what they were doing. The 51 men that police were able to identify aged between the ages of 22 and 70. You'll notice I haven't put too much focus on the perpetrator or any of the other people. This is mostly because I want to make sure that this focus stays on Gisèle as being the hero who has come forward, who's decided to take this story public so that she can alert any other women and all women around the world to be more alert of this sort of situation happening. And on top of that, to make sure that women don't feel like they have to suffer in silence when they fall victim to these sorts of crimes, because they are not the ones that should be feeling shame. And honestly, like, the strength of this woman is mind-blowing. Gisèle Pélicot's name will be known worldwide, and I would hate to draw any attention to any of the perpetrators because, one, they don't deserve it, and two, justice will be served. Like, these pieces of shit are going to end up in jail, and they are going to end up in jail for a long time. They don't deserve any media, they don't deserve any attention because they are just scum. This court case started on the 2nd of September and is due to go on until the end of December, which is when I think all the verdicts will be done. I do believe that as this court case goes on, there will be other things that come out, which will mean that there will be more court cases around this situation. I have been reposting anything that does highlight any of the other perpetrators, identities and everything. I will keep reposting those. I just personally won't be giving these men the time of day on my page.
I find it frustrating that this stance is still considered fringe and odd today, instead of the obvious perspective of a woman in an increasingly hostile and sexualized world. This, dear viewers, is where we part. I could easily have gone on to so many cases, but I think this one is both current and you get the point because it is so surprising that so many men participated, that so many were from her community, that she is an older woman, and that you would believe after a certain age you're free. Well, there are granny prostitutes in Korea. There are women who are being raped in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. There are children being assaulted. There is no time when you will ever be free from the possibility of assault. And the thing is, she's been happily married to her husband for 50 years. She thought she chose well. She has children and grandchildren. It's very frustrating and, to be honest, quite scary to think that someone could betray you like that after years and years of marriage. That people in your community are possible of doing this type of thing to you. And of course, I think a lot of people don't like to acknowledge the role pornography has to play because, yes, boomers had their old-time magazines that they would hide, but it was a thing of shame. You weren't discussing it with friends. It wasn't joking about everywhere. And certainly the pictures were of nude women, not women getting tortured, not women being abused. The point wasn't the non-consent. Sure, there was voyeurism aspect to it, but the difference between pornography back then and pornography now is that the point is that you're supposed to be hurt. And I find that incredibly disturbing. Anyhow, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, let me know in the comments section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.